that got a lot of problems going into this offseason and in 2024. The teams that are radioactive have a cap hit, have a toxic head coach at this point that could be on the out here. And we're about to talk about a few teams that we think are going to fall off a cliff next year and be towards the bottom of what they were this season. So why don't you give me a team that you've been thinking about like late at night that just keeps you up like, oh, can't believe they're going to be that bad next year.
Oh, are we going like deep or are we just going like the obvious here?
Let's go deep and then we'll go obvious.
So obvious one here. I think I've already bullied them enough, but I'll mention them again. The Bills. First of all, Stephon Diggs hates Josh Allen for some reason, and they got Von Miller's contract looming, and they have all these other things. Josh Allen's contract is set in. They have, I believe, the second worst salary cap situation in all of the NFL. If they're not second to the bottom, they're in the bottom five. They have $50 million below the salary cap, or above the salary cap, that is. So they're going to make a lot of really tough decisions. This is a team that last year started off 6-5, got hot at the end of the season, and why they won their division. But overall, like last season, a lot of issues. You saw Josh Allen led the league in turnovers. Not a knock on Josh Allen, but like the coaching with Sean McDermott, should they have kept him? We both believe he should have been let go because of everything that was occurring. There's chemistry issues in the locker room with Stephon Diggs. And then on the other side of it, like, yes, that the rest of that division is in rebuild to some extent.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of issues that they got to solve. They got to draft a receiver. They got to move on from Stephon Diggs, most likely. The Bills, I think, are screwed.
Yeah, I think the Bills could potentially be screwed. I think the saving grace is the division that they're in, but I think Sean McDermott is probably on the hot seat this year, especially if he has another playoff hiccup like he had versus the Kansas City Chiefs, where he called one of the dumbest play calls I have ever seen. And you're lucky that Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I believe it was him that fumbled out of the end zone. One of those players on the Chiefs that doesn't matter and shouldn't have been on the field in that moment to begin with. But you're so bad that Kadarius Toney was on your roster, so those players just have to be out there. But that was Sean McDermott's saving grace there. But I think for him, like with the Buffalo Bills, he's someone where I think Mike Vrabel makes a lot more sense than a Sean McDermott. And Sean McDermott is good at building a culture, but Mike Vrabel is good at elevating players' talent, elevating everyone's play there. And Buffalo is still a hard-nosed defensive city. So if we're going to go defense again, I think Mike Vrabel would be an excellent replacement there. So I think they do have a lot of things to work out with. And then it's who is Josh Allen throwing the ball to if Stephon Diggs is gone? And are you going to be able to replace him with a really good wide receiver? Are you going to be able to trade for an Ayuk, Devontae Adams, or hit on a draft pick, which as far as receivers is really hard to do? And I can't think of a really, really great receiver over the past few years that Buffalo has drafted, because they had to trade for Stephon Diggs and then you draft Gabe Davis. Okay.
Friend of
the show, Gabe Davis. You drafted him. No slight against him. You have some nice players, but I think you have to start going through a little bit of a rebuild and retooling there. But the only saving grace is that team in your division that can't beat teams that have motivation, a chip on their shoulder, sound fundamentals, good coaching, good players, and oh yeah, a winning record unless it's the Dallas Cowboys in Miami. What the fuck are the Dolphins doing? I mean, honestly, I keep hearing about, oh, look at this offense. Mike McDaniel's and that team racking up yards. I'm like, great. You rack up yards against the worst teams in the league, against the Jets, against the Giants, against the Cardinals, against some of the worst teams I've ever seen step on a football field. And sometimes I'm like, is this a soccer team that suited up in an NFL uniform? And then Tyreek Hill is running past everyone there. You have the Tyreek Hill contract, and it's all centered around this offseason. Are we going to pay Tua? I was like, okay, we're about to find out how dumb that Miami Dolphins are this year, because Tua in the playoffs, I'm just like, wow, what a disappointment for a guy who is supposed to be one of the best throwers of the football. He's accurate. He's on time. I saw no timing. I see this guy get flustered versus the best teams in the league. And then you beat the Cowboys. That's nice, but you didn't do anything against good teams. So How am I supposed to believe the Miami Dolphins, with a pretty bad salary cap situation, are going to suddenly snap out of it and start beating winning teams? And if you have another season like that, Mike McDaniels is about to be on the hot seat because I keep hearing, wow, what a great coach this guy is. I'm like, oh, because he's good with the media and in his press conferences. But when you get on the football field versus good teams, your team underperforms and you blow the biggest 2 possession lead of anyone since 2014 versus the guy who puts mayonnaise in his coffee. Like, come on. What are y'all doing?
Yeah, honestly, you know what? I talked about the Bills last segment. The Dolphins are more screwed because they don't have a Josh Allen. They don't have the defense that's been built there. The Dolphins have to decide who's going to throw it to Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill is going to take $30 million of that cap. And then after that, it's like, you have some nice players on defense. Christian Wilkins, will they keep him? Will they keep Derek Armstead? Will they keep all these players here? But they also have to decide whether they're going to keep their quarterback. And in my mind, I wouldn't keep Tua. I would go after, I mean, not that you can afford it, but go after someone like Kirk Cousins. But I don't feel comfortable with paying Tua because he hasn't shown to be that guy in those big games. We saw him in the Germany game against the Chiefs do absolutely nothing. We saw him in the playoffs do absolutely nothing. Against teams with a winning record, he does absolutely nothing. And this isn't that I have any sort of animosity towards Tua. Great person. Watch this documentary. Very interesting. But, like, this team is screwed. They have the worst cap situation in the NFL outside of the Saints. And I just don't see any way that they can mend those fuses without taking a significant step back.
Yeah, no, I don't think you can mend those fuses. And I think the Mike McDaniel thing, the whole facade that he's one of the best coaches in the league, I see it with the offense. I see it with how they run the football. But again, if you can't run the football when you need to run it, I just don't get the point of what racking up yards against bad teams is going to do. So I think the Dolphins are going to be in trouble if they mess up this Tua situation. And it's all centered around what do you do at the quarterback position, which is the easiest thing to mess up. But I don't think you should pay Tua, and I think you should move on and draft someone or go after Kirk Cousins hard this offseason, even someone like Carson Wentz. And then after that, I know we both agree on this team, but I'll let you take the reins from here. What's another team you could just see falling off a cliff?
Well, I think the obvious one, based on just how bad their salary cap is, the Saints. The Saints are so screwed because not only can they not really cut Derek Carr or trade him because it doesn't really help them at all, a team that has an absurd amount of dead money already. So the Saints are screwed because what do they do with Alvin Kamara? What do they do with Cam Jordan? What do they do with Marshawn Lattimore? What do they do with Michael Thomas? The list goes on. Hell, what do they do with Taysom Hill at this point? Because Taysom Hill has a big contract. They have all these contracts, and what they've done the last decade is just push the can down the road. Yeah. Well, now they're at the point where they're nearly $100 million over the cap. And they have to make some tough decisions. Not only that, their offensive line, not that great. Their quarterback, not that great. Soon to be running back position after they get rid of Alvin Kamara, not that great. Now it's going to be Chris Olave and Jawan Johnson. And then whoever the hell is playing quarterback for them, which apparently it's going to be Derek Carr, because it's pretty much all guaranteed. And that's something that only you were going to do. Because other than that, the Jets were the only other team interested in Derek Carr.
Yeah, well, don't forget to mention the most obvious and the most detrimental part of the team besides Derek Carr is now that Arthur Smith is fired, you have the biggest Karen as a head coach in the league. I mean, just look at how Dennis Allen walks and you'll be like, that is not the walk of a coach. That is inspiring. That is the walk of someone that's like, excuse me, you are standing too close to me in Target, and it makes me uncomfortable. That's the vibe Dennis Allen gives off now that Arthur Smith isn't there anymore. And that is probably the biggest blemish on that team outside of the negative $100 million. And it's like, at this point, do you have accountants? Do you have people who knows how the salary cap works? Or did you just let a 12-year-old scribble all over your salary cap and in free agency? And you're like, okay, Derek Carr, Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, all players who are past their prime, or one player who doesn't know what position he is. Yeah, that is the New Orleans Saints here.
The only solution that they truly have, and this isn't necessarily a good solution because it does involve committing federal crimes, but Maybe it's you call on the guys of Enron. If you guys are unfamiliar with Enron, look into them. Some of the accounting scandals of the 2000s causing the dot-com bust that did occur. Maybe if you can fudge the numbers a little bit with your salary cap, do a little bit of a wink nod with Marshawn Lattimore, wink nod with Alvin Kamara, maybe then there's hope. Maybe
Yeah.
if you commit accounting fraud, then maybe there's hope there. But other than that, the Saints might actually be the worst team in that division next year if the Carolina Panthers have an ounce of intelligence.